Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Thursday, April 27th, 2023. Time for another show. Time to fret again about the high schooler making the bus. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. But it's a nice day. No rain in the forecast. Cool, but in the high 50s. I'll give you the traffic report if you want, but I'm checking the weather for the potential hike to school. It's happened before. And, there's only a few more chances to make it happen again. So, okay, that's where my eye has been this morning. But, others of you may have cast your gaze about elsewhere. I see this morning there's some new information on social media, not yet necessarily written up for mass consumption just yet, but from some of the reporters covering the Pentagon, or the investigation into the Discord leaker, the Air National Guardsman Jack Tahara, I believe his name was, that thought he would look really cool to his rising army of incel weirdo teenagers if he could leak them classified information and tell them about the way the world really worked, like the various crazy conspiracy theories he had about, pretty much everything. Well, as it turns out, he probably should have been spotted a long time prior. He was a bit of a threat, and having gone through his various Discord forum messages, reporter Eric Toller, who was, I think, one of the reporters who first identified the leaker personally, finding his name and identifying exactly who he was, still looking into things and looking through his Discord messages, and it basically looks like he was, just to add, insult to injury, it looks like he was about, this close. How many times have I said, here? This close to being a mass shooter as well. Talking about all kinds of fun things like stockpiling weapons and guns and Molotov cocktails and shooting up a school and how people ought to die and da-da-da-da-da. And he had, apparently among his belongings and many guns, a military-style helmet with a camera mount, which is, of course, exactly what the weirdos who have come before him, mass killers who have live-streamed their shootings, have rigged themselves up with. So, it sounds like he was pretty much typical in almost every way in terms of an extremist idiot that you wanted off the streets as soon as possible, versus giving him daily access to the Joint Chiefs of Staff briefings, et cetera, et cetera. So perhaps we'll spend some time catching up on that. Some legal news. The Jean Carroll suit goes forward, and that's getting quite dramatic. Word from the D.C. Circuit, was it the D.C. Circuit that took up this case, that Mike Pence, Donald Trump can't block Mike Pence from testifying before a grand jury investigating January 6th, and we'll go through the details of that and see what we learn about the posture of that case and where we stand. The Republicans managed to get their debt ceiling bill through. Today they'll be hitting the floor with a motion to invoke the War Powers Act by very serious actor Matt Gaetz. But I don't know. I don't know what kind of, I imagine they have a pretty good chance of success that Republicans would band together for this. But removing U.S. troops, except for the Marine Guards at the diplomatic installations from Somalia, where, nothing's going on and no situation needs any monitoring whatsoever. There's just, every time we, leave the place alone, warlords and pirates are in operation. But hey, other than that, no big deal, right? Besides which, it's probably good for sex trafficking. Maybe he wants to invest in that there in the Horn of Africa. I don't know. I'm not certain what he's going for here. Let's see. Tucker Carlson continues to put himself in the news, although I'm not sure I understand exactly what it is he's doing, and maybe he doesn't know either. Others watching him and suggesting that maybe he's done after all. But in this landscape of fragmented media and places where you can put yourself on here, like we do, although, not nearly to as great of effect, I'm sure, as being on Fox News, I'm sure he'll get himself a platform. The question is, what will he be using it for, and which Tucker Carlson will show up? Will it be the one who texted how much he loathed Trump and about how his big election lies were in fact lies, or will it be the sycophant one that sucks up to Trump and gives him, an hour, 2 hours worth of interview time in which he just laughs at all his jokes and says what a great guy he is? I don't know. Stick around and find out, I suppose. Greg Dworkin is around, and he'll stick around for just a little while longer and tell us what he's finding in the news today. It's Thursday. Last chance to tell us what the hell's going on in the world. Greg, good morning.
Good morning. Well, the proper initials, of course, are FAFO, not SAFO.
Stick around and find out what happens to people who FAFO.
Yeah.
How's that?
So, I had some lightning round stuff. You already covered the Jack Teixeira stuff, but he did some really nasty stuff in high school.
Yeah,
and according to the New York Times, and as you say, Eric Toller and others,
great.
Apparently he used to sleep with AK-47,
45s, 47s,
45,
15s,
49, and
220,
a
221, whatever it takes. Is what?
A bazooka.
A bazooka?
Yeah.
What? Oh, well, that's
usually
that's
bigger
bigger
was
than
like really weird. And of course, there was all the violence, the misogyny, and all that other stuff going back to high school.
Yes.
So of course, this is the
Bad
kind of guy
person.
you recruit for, state secrets.
Yeah, well, whether he's was recruited or not, he was passing that stuff out. One of the things I happened to see in one of the photos displayed, apparently photos of his bedroom are a prominent part of the investigation now. And among other things, one, it's all done up in camouflage, which is like a little bit of a hint. But two,
that way you can't find the bedroom.
They managed to do so.
It needs to be made or not because you can't see it.
That's true. It
if I were
shouldn't have been in a
I'd
house.
totally
it should have
do it that
been
way.
out in the woods, and then he would have been
leave me
fine.
alone. You can't even find my bed.
But among the items spotted in the collection was he had a poster board up, cork board, and hanging from this thing was a little banner of sorts, and apparently this banner bore the insignia of the general staff of the Russian army. Don't really know where you come across such a thing, but having it hanging in your bedroom when you've got top secret clearance and yada yada, and they're supposed to be looking at that sort of thing.
I don't know. At that age, I had W.C. Fields and Groucho Marx posters.
Well, I would have kicked you out of the army for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think. Okay, interesting.
I won't be a member of any club that'll have me.
And that's how you know.
Yeah.
Wow.
So we have some lightning round stuff.
All right.
Before we get to the overarching things. Lightning round stuff. So Kevin McCarthy passed his debt limit bill by 2 votes. And, of course, the media's arguing whether that strengthens his hand or loosens his hand or makes debt limit problems worse or better. It seems obvious to me that this is the same play that got him speaker. You go and you try to do something, and everybody holds out because they know you're incredibly weak and they can get stuff from you. And then they go to your office one-on-one, and you have to promise them things to get their vote, and you promise them things, and you get their vote. And so he gets a vote, and somehow or other this is supposed to project strength. And in fact, what it's doing is just telling everybody how weak you are because you can't do anything, even a messaging bill that's not supposed to pass, that is dead on arrival in the Senate. You can't even get that passed without bending and breaking and sucking up to everybody. So I don't know how that helps you.
I don't know. And he doesn't know either. So
he doesn't know either. To me, what's going to happen is Treasury in the end is going to not be able to negotiate with these terrorists on the debt.
Even if they want to.
Which
they don't.
And Biden will just do something unilaterally, like saying, well, according to this amendment or that amendment or something else, you can't ignore the debt limit, so we're going to follow it and raise it, and it's stupid and it doesn't really matter anyway. On the other hand, you want to sit down and negotiate on the budget, that's totally legit, and I'm ready to do that at any time.
All right.
And whether McCarthy uses that as a fig leaf or not remains to be seen because he's so weak it's impossible to know what he'll do. The scary part is that he's so weak, not that he's so strong. because when you're that weak, you have to give in to everybody. And since Shadow Speaker Marjorie Taylor Greene is running the place, it's really hard to know what's going to happen next.
Yeah, well, she doesn't know either.
Right. Next on the lightning round menu here is Disney is suing Florida Governor Ron DeSantis over control of self-governing district,
all right,
which is a dramatic escalation. And it's interesting because the last CEO of Disney was the one that said this "Don't Say Gay" bill is really stupid, and it's like everything that's bad. And he was ousted and replaced with old CEO Bob Iger, who was felt to perhaps have better relations with DeSantis.
Okay. That's an interesting move.
Iger's suing him.
All right.
I mean, DeSantis is just weak also. He's floundering in the polls. A new Emerson poll is out showing him trailing Trump by 7 more points than he was last time they looked, or 9 points. He's almost in free fall. He looks weak. He hasn't done anything. And the party's consolidating around Trump. So Disney's in a relatively stronger position than they were a couple of months ago when DeSantis was trying to do this. And, I just don't know what happens to DeSantis at this point. He's just like falling off the map.
Well, that's okay with me. I mean, I'll be glad to see him gone. Does Disney have lawyers to sue people with? I'm not aware of their
apparently
legally.
They have the wherewithal to hire one or two.
So it turns out, okay.
They can always find somebody who perhaps did more than maintain a parking garage.
Yes, right. Well, they are famously litigious, as it turns out, the Disney people. But
just try to paint the mural of Mickey on your little store.
Right.
In the back on the brick, facade that nobody can see, and you'll get the pantsuit off of you.
Yeah. Well, pantsuit. Speaking of pantsuits.
Well, these corporations have to protect their name and their brand and this, that, and everything else.
Yeah, well, Disney very aggressive about that. So, I mean, it's a different area of law, but okay, I guess.
Well, there's, a lot. Again, I am not a lawyer. I don't play one on podcasts or the internet.
Would you
But
do it anyway?
A lot of the lightning round stuff happens to be legal because there's so much legal stuff going on. So this next one is a bipartisan response to the Clarence Thomas fiasco, according to Greg Sargent. Congress in recent years has abdicated its oversight role when it comes to the courts, but a new bill from Angus King, Independent Maine, and Lisa Murkowski, Republican Alaska, poses a fresh test to lawmakers. In the wake of the uproar over Thomas, will they find the will to do even cursory oversight? It would require the Supreme Court to create its own code of conduct, which already exists for other federal judges, and require the court to publish the code, appoint somebody to hear complaints, and mandate an annual report on investigations and actions. So it would require the court to impose an ethical code upon itself. I'm sure Justice Roberts finds that a bridge too far, and he refused to even talk to Congress about it. But when you refuse to talk to Congress about stuff, sometimes they turn around and pass stuff, which is why you should talk to Congress about stuff.
Yeah, that's one of the balancing acts you're supposed to be doing with those whole checks and whatever they call them. They go along with the checks. Anyway, but they should see if they can balance things out that way. And you speak to them and tell them what you think about ethics. And it's not really a big deal, but well, I don't know. It's one of those things that they like to say you can't compel us to do anything. But that's actually the problem. You're sort of highlighting the issue here by refusing to testify.
So the next thing, which is also not just lightning round, but legal, Trump loses appeal to block Pence's testimony. You mentioned that in the beginning. What's interesting is that it was a unanimous decision from the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. And in case those of you are wondering, well, what number is it? It doesn't have a number. The others have numbers.
That's right.
But the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals is D.C. And then you start with 1 and 2, which I think covers Connecticut and all the others. But 5th and 9th are the famous ones.
Yes. Texas, California.
Texas and California. But the D.C. Circuit said in a unanimous decision from the judges Patricia Millett, Robert Wilkins, Greg Katsas on the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals came in a sealed case on Wednesday night. So
sealed.
What will they do? Pence has no comment, and he's already said he's not going to appeal anything, and Trump had no comment.
Okay. Well, he's not a very appealing guy, so that's fine.
Yeah, that's good. So hopefully, that'll just strengthen Jack Smith's hand, and he'll get around to doing what he gets around to doing. Clearly, if he needs to look at January 6th stuff, it would be really helpful to have Pence's testimony, so I can understand him not indicting until he gets that.
Okay.
Next, on the legal lightning round stuff, there's just so much legal stuff going on here. There's the E. Jean Carroll trial, which, again, you also mentioned. This is Charlie Pierce's coverage of it in Esquire, The Bravery of E. Jean Carroll. She's taken a hailstorm of abuse already in her suit against Trump, but this is really leading with her chin. And, she talked about in unfortunate detail everything that Trump did, pulling her pants down and everything else he did. And then she said, it left me unable to ever have a romantic life again. It was really searing testimony. And then she gets cross-examined, and so they try to impugn her character. And, it, needless to say, takes more than guts to do something like this, but she's doing it.
Yeah.
And we'll see how that goes.
Right. Well, it's a rough go of it there. She obviously, I think, by now she has prepared herself. She knows what she was getting into. That doesn't make it any easier to do
exactly
by any means, but it's really a testament to how she has steeled herself. This is the way you defend. I mean, this is the way, unfortunately, the legal eagles of the world defend against such a suit. And the
other side of the coin is that
no way you can
in
do
the
it
process
really.
of putting this testimony up, they talk about, why didn't you go to the police?
Yeah.
Why didn't you
all here?
People were advising me not to because they said Trump has 1,000 lawyers and he'll come down on you in a ton of bricks and you can't win.
Yeah, I mean, why didn't I report it earlier? Because I was told that a bunch of a-hole lawyers would come into the courtroom and try to make me
do
look
what you're
like,
going to see them do tomorrow.
Yeah, right. So they were right about that, and eventually I decided, okay, now he's in a position to more or less destroy the world unless people
that's
know what he's really
what
about.
They said, and it's actually a pretty good, a legal defense for what she did, which is she's not the defendant. But the point is, if you want to know why, wait till tomorrow, and I'll show you why.
Yeah, you'll show me why. How dare you ask me this question when you know what you're going to do tomorrow?
Yeah, exactly right. Next, and again, by the way, lightning round and legal issue. We're now talking about the Proud Boys seditious conspiracy trial, which is finished.
There's a trial for those.
It's now
guys?
gone to the jury. The jury took a day. They're going to take another day tomorrow and
lunch.
Today, and maybe over the weekend. We don't know.
But you go to Friday. That's the practice.
So there's a lovely summary of the whole thing by Brandy Buckman over at Empty Wheel site.
That's what she does.
And if you're interested in the details, Roger Parloff and she, who were the two people who have been there every single day covering for each other when one of them couldn't be there.
Besides the Proud Boys, of course.
Roger Parloff for Lawfare and Brandy for Empty Wheel. I believe Roger was for Lawfare. But in any case,
we're all for Lawfare.
There is a podcast with Ben Wittes interview them about how the trial went on Lawfare, which is really quite interesting. Long, but quite interesting. So there's that, and then we'll have to wait and see what happens there.
Okay.
And now something that's actually not legal and not a trial.
Not legal. You're going to do something not legal, everybody.
It's illegal, but Nate Silver is going to be leaving 538, and ABC Disney is pulling back support for the site. So it'll still exist. Some people will still work there, but it's going to change. And so those of us who remember how it all got started were just musing over what it all meant and the things that that particular site plus Nate had contributed to the way things stand. And I found this 2013 piece that I wrote at Daily Kos, which really was referring to a 2009 Netroots Nation panel.
Yes.
I was the moderator.
All right.
Charlie Cook and Charles Franklin from the MU Law Poll and Mark Blumenthal at the time at pollster.com, which was at Huffington Post, and Nate Silver were there. And I introduced Nate Silver to Charlie Cook. It's the first time they ever met. And it was an awfully good panel, and it was a good time. But in 2013, we were just looking back and seeing how things were. Drew Linzer, who now runs the poll for Daily Kos, said the greatest thing 538 ever accomplished was not forecasting elections. And he didn't. What he did is he aggregated stuff.
Okay.
And you were supposed to take what his odds were, and you forecast the election. That was the whole point. right? And what he did,
understood it that way. Really.
Matt Iglesias said back in 2013, when you look at it with all due respect to Silver, his ability to beat the armchair analysts of the TV pundits is much more a story about the TV pundits being morons than it is a story about Silver having an amazingly innovative analytic method. But most of all, from a non-grumpy viewpoint, Silver's success is a reminder that journalism is about more than getting the answers right. He's an engaging writer who not only came up with an election forecasting method that far outpaces the TV pundits, but more impressively, he found a large audience for us. But again, he wasn't forecasting. That's what people who read his site really don't understand, which is pretty clear why he needed the site. If somebody does an aggregation of polls, and as our panel explained, stops cherry-picking individual polls like Rasmussen, and uses an aggregator, the aggregator is only as good as the polls that go into it. But the aggregator showing that one side is ahead compared to the other is not a forecast. It's simply, this is where things stand at the moment.
A snapshot.
It's a snapshot.
That was always the word. Yeah,
He's always done that, and everybody keeps calling him a forecaster. That's not what he is, and that's not what he did. Yes, but the snapshot shows somebody's ahead by 10 points. Well, it is what it is. But, But you're saying that according to this, this guy's got an 80% chance of winning. Well, that means there's a 20% chance he won't. I'm not telling you which it is, the 80 or the 20. I am telling you it's 80 versus 20. I am telling you that it's an accurate 10-point lead. You draw your own conclusion from that.
Okay. What now?
Oh, he's a forecaster. And look, he got it wrong. What did he get wrong? Well, the polls said. Did he say that the polls predict? Polls never predict. This is an ongoing argument that's happened since the beginning of his site. And back then, 10 years ago, people sort of like Drew Linzer, who is a political scientist and a pollster and knows what he's talking about, got it right and understood what was going on here.
Okay.
As replying at the same time, 2013. Silver's reputation as a math wizard often obscures his innovations as a journalist, but it's the latter that makes him such a valuable hire for ESPN and ABC. Lots of people can run the numbers, but Silver can use the numbers to tell readers an engaging, fast-paced, and constantly changing story. You know who else does that? Of course, Karnacki, and he's really popular. Why? Because he can explain the numbers. Is Karnacki forecasting? Nobody calls him a forecaster.
Is that right? No one calls him that?
No.
All right.
He's an explainer.
Well, maybe that was the fault of our media training. If we had trained Nate better how to explain exactly what he was doing, but we got the basics down, and we were just learning to look at the camera and not move our heads. It didn't go as far. And by the way,
that's a true story.
Yes.
Way back when, that's exactly what David and I were doing.
That's
with
right.
Nate and others.
I wasn't training him. We were training alongside him.
We were being trained by Joe Silverman and some real pros.
Yeah. So altogether, right before he, hit the big time. So the thing is, he was never able to explain exactly what he was doing, but his head stopped moving. So I think
and he knew where to look at the camera.
Right. So, all right. We learned the rest of it. Messaging is important, even for people who say they're not messaging. You got to message about the fact that you're not messaging, just delivering the news. And saying you got to draw your own conclusions, and I don't know. We didn't do enough of it, I guess.
Right.
He was never, a media maven. He didn't like it.
Right. And so what I said at the time, back in 2013, is that Nate's one of our own, having spent a short time posting here at Daily Kos, participating in Netroots Nation, being an overall mensch for the times we've interacted. I was mildly skeptical of his earliest posts, but he proved me and many others wrong. But the important thing about the discussion isn't who does or doesn't like Nate. It's how and what one can do to improve political reporting. So I'm sorry the New York Times lost him, because that leaves us with Tom Friedman and David Brooks. But I'm glad Nate went to ABC at the time and had a platform. And our friend Mark Sumner wrote, Nate Silver didn't fit at the New York Times because he was too often right, which is a crime that Friedman, Dowd, Brooks, and the others never commit.
Yes. Well, trying to stay out of trouble, those guys.
Right.
So cutting back and leaving 538, which is his own creation, does he have another number in mind, or is he going to go with Tucker Carlson, or I don't know?
Well, we'll have a lot to say about Tucker Carlson too.
Who?
After the break, but I just thought all of that stuff was interesting, and when you step back and look and see what Nate Silver and the other aggregators have done, we're now used to the fact that there's no reason to get upset about a single poll that you don't like or that you do like.
We did learn that.
Yeah, you have to learn to look at all of them. And what you can't do is cherry pick a poll you like and say, look, we're winning. And you can't take a poll like Rasmussen at face value and say, oh, well, we must be behind. We've learned to be a lot more discriminatory in a good way about looking to see what's under the hood and who are they measuring, and not to take the poll apart and unskew the polls. That was a thing.
Oh, yes. Recall. Right.
But rather say, well, who are we looking at? Are we looking at the adults? Are we looking at those people who are registered voters? Are we looking at independents? What do they think? What is the actual nature of the poll question we're asking here? Mm-hmm. And what's the margin of error, of course, and what else is going on? And so by doing that, you learn a whole lot. You learn that issue questions depend upon how you phrase the question. But in some cases, the sentiment is so overwhelming, it doesn't really matter how you ask an abortion question these days, for example.
Yes,
it's not that you shouldn't analyze it and look carefully at the wording. But if you're looking for background checks, it doesn't matter what the wording is. Background checks are universally and incredibly popular. Yeah, and if you can change the wording to change it 5 points or 10 points one way or the other, you're only moving it from 80 to 70.
I guess that's true, too. Yeah. Well, now you have that answer, and we know where those things go. And all right, so I guess poll aggregation wins out over the unskewing. That was an important victory.
Or your gut feeling, or I talked to a Republican operative, and that's what I'm going to report.
Or, of course, the Michael Cohen of Says Who. The Says Who play says everybody. Right. We aggregate. The aggregate says so. That didn't work either. So good news
Tucker
on that.
Carlson after the break.
Okay. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I was promised Tucker Carlson, but you don't have to.
Hey, listen, we're not only going to do Tucker Carlson, we're going to do Gilgamesh.
What? Okay.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you know, this is like Chronicles of Change. Let's interact and connect all the dots here. So The Onion, of course, had the best take.
There. Okay.
It's Tucker Carlson said, I'm already in talks to be let go from OAN Breitbart and the Daily Caller.
Go straight to it, right? Okay, why not?
Right. Brian Stelter noted that the Wall Street Journal also says some higher-ups within Fox felt that Carlson trafficked in thinly veiled racism on his show. As I've been saying in interviews, Tucker had critics on the inside, not just the outside. Upper management lost tolerance with him. And, of course, the stories go that it's because of those redacted comments that Tucker made that Fox News knows about now, but we don't.
Oh.
And John Harwood looked at Brian Stelter's comment about thinly veiled racism on the show and simply said it wasn't veiled.
Yeah, I mean, it's so thin.
There was nothing veiled about it.
Okay. Yeah, I can...
Right? Matthew Gertz notes, and we talked about this yesterday. Tucker
Matthew Gertz.
These sorts of analyses tend to ignore that even as Tucker Carlson can still make a lot of money and Fox News can retain or exceed its ratings in the time slot, both can become less influential and dangerous. And then he cites people like Glenn Beck. They replace them with people like the Five that get eyeballs but have no influence.
Yeah,
who cares what people on the Five say?
I guess
never
that's
talk
true.
about them.
We don't. I don't know. Maybe with Tucker Carlson out of the way, people will find their
Here's a good one.
offensive material.
Do you remember who had Tucker Carlson's time slot before Carlson came in?
I don't know.
You probably
did I ever
remember
know?
Bill O'Reilly.
Yeah, sure.
Do you remember that it was Greta Van Susteren's slot too?
Wow,
No.
what a progression. No.
Do you remember Greta Van Susteren?
Yeah,
No.
well, I remember her, but talk about what a weird progression. They really are. Just,
Right,
I wonder you wonder who's coming next.
So it's not automatic
The Hitler show.
that you simply put somebody else in there and then they're revolving cogs and they're all the same. They're not all the same.
No, they get worse.
They may get eyeballs, but some of them really wind up not having influence, and after they leave, they often don't have influence. So Gilgamesh, what's this got to do with Gilgamesh?
Yes.
Well, I'll tell you.
What?
And that's because I have all these varied interests, and I discovered a website called The Defector, which actually talks a lot about sports,
Okay.
and then occasionally other topics. And they happen to
Americans
be
don't like
talking
sports.
about myth and rumor. And they had a podcast on April 26, 2023, called When Does Gossip Become a Myth? Now, I don't know if you remember the story of Gilgamesh,
No.
but he
remember
was a
that wacky
Sumerian
name.
hero.
Okay.
And the basic storyline is that he was a king who was oppressing his people. The gods didn't like it. They created a wild man named Enkidu to go teach Gilgamesh a lesson. The two wrestled. Gilgamesh won, but was so impressed with Enkidu's strength that they became friends.
This is a wild
And then the
story.
two of them went on to have adventures, including killing a divine bull and a godlike figure.
I'm not certain what the lesson
In
is
service
here.
of the gods. However, the gods were kind of still upset with them. So Enkidu died and went down to the underworld. And Gilgamesh was chastened by this and spent a lot of his time trying to figure out how to become immortal. He failed. He couldn't pass the tests.
Like Peter Thiel.
One of the tests was overcome sleep, and he couldn't. And after he failed, he slept for a week. So he
not
reminds
good
me
at
a lot of my contemporaries in medical school, for example.
Yes.
But he was human in a lot
So
of
much you
ways,
can
and
do.
so that's why it was so interesting. And but again, he started as a king, and then sort of was raised into a higher figure as time went on, sort of like King Arthur. Maybe he was an original chieftain, and then he became the Arthur Legends and such. So this podcast, When Does Gossip Become a Myth, points out by Kelsey McKinney that they were doing a new translation of Gilgamesh, and she hadn't read it since high school and was surprised to find myself laughing aloud. She said, when reading the centuries-old tale, it was so fun, so modern, so gossipy. I'm not saying the story about two best bros who think they're enemies and then go on a quest to try to kill a god is gossip exactly. What I'm trying to say is, what if it were gossip at one point and it just ballooned out of control? What if they were two largish men instead of two giants, but every time the story was told, they got bigger? What if instead of a plant that made
Bill
you
Brad's
immortal, they really found a plant that was like amoxicillin? It doesn't feel impossible to me to imagine a world in which the root version of our myths was just some guy.
Sure.
And then she goes on to say, I'm not an expert on myths, and I have my expert on myths here, and let's talk about myths, baby. And so they go and do it. I thought it was kind of an interesting topic. But the point of all of that is that if you're looking at a story, you really have to separate myth and gossip from what's really going on. And in regard to Tucker Carlson, we know he was fired. We don't know why he was fired. There's all this stuff floating around. We talked about some of the gossip yesterday. How he was fired, like they didn't tell him to the last minute, is gossip. It may be fact, but we don't know. He didn't tell us this.
That's true.
And why he was fired, because maybe he got on the wrong side of a messianic view of white Christian nationalism, and Rupert Murdoch got scared by it. That's gossip. Maybe it's because of these text messages that were incredibly crudely insulting to chief executives there, like Suzanne Scott, the CEO. Oh, but that's gossip. You don't know that.
No.
And then the myth gets created about, well, Tucker Carlson is so big that Fox wanted to show that he wasn't bigger than the network, but maybe he is, because he's going to go on to do this, that, and everything else. And if you look at Twitter and other social media sites, the MAGA people are just talking about how they're going to stop watching Fox and Tucker Carlson's going to be everything. And there's something to it in that. Here's a piece from an actual news site, WSBT. In the 2 days since Tucker Carlson was fired by Fox News, the cable news channels lost a step both its primetime dominance and hundreds of millions of dollars in value on the market. According to Nielsen, The Five is still the most popular show across all of cable news. And again, The Five doesn't have any influence, even though it's popular. MSNBC beat out the conservative media channel in the primetime arena Monday, Rachel Maddow's program, for example.
All right.
And Fox News Tonight, the placeholder show, represented a 21% drop in viewership. And then the actual 8 o'clock slot also dropped. And it dropped last night, according to Brian Selter. Remained true on Tuesday. A Tucker loyal segment of the Fox audience has shifted to Newsmax. Within a few hours, Newsmax at one point had more than triple the usual audience for its never-ending pro-GOP talk show, for example. So, Fox is getting hit by this, but at the same time, what happens to Tucker remains to be seen because he himself can lose influence as well. Both things can be true at the same time. Here's a piece by Philip Klein in the National Review, How Tucker Carlson Will Lose Influence Without Fox, and basically goes through the whole Glenn Beck model of what happens to you after you lose. This is the Defense One piece, and we talked about this yesterday, how Tucker Carlson helped turn Americans against the military and how happy they are that he's gone. And then getting back to why I started on Gilgamesh, that same website, Defector, has a piece here by David Roth, which I actually thought was pretty good. Who could mistake Tucker Carlson for anything else? That is to say, for a while, people who knew him through the circles in which he once moved socially, rich people in Washington and media people in Washington, D.C., thought it was interesting to try to figure out whether and how much Carlson was acting when he did all of this. But the question of whether any of that is true is not very interesting. The question of whether Carlson is smart is besides the point. That Carlson, who is reportedly obsessed with the minute-by-minute ratings analytics that Fox provided, might merely have been giving his audience what they wanted, doesn't exonerate him. The decision to double down on the white nationalism because the minute-by-minute show the audience eats it up, as one former Fox employee told the New York Times, is revealing about Carlson's audience, but less so about Carlson himself. It's like talking about whether your dishwasher really hates dirt and grease. Whatever Carlson believes has never been important and would only be interesting to people who are not themselves very interesting or interested in very interesting things. At this point, there's no reason to believe Carlson actually believes anything or that these beliefs would even briefly complicate his job. There's no evidence for that.
Okay.
And then Carlson was reportedly fired by Fox News, and much of the story since then has been gossip.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
But again, not all of that interesting. Right? And the thing is, that Carlson's job was to go in and, of course, try to outrage people. And the author of this piece says, I don't have to tell you that this job is a stupid, disgusting one. Carlson's job. And one in which only somebody who's facile and shameless could flourish to the extent that Carlson has. It's demeaning, but it pays well.
Yes.
Right? Carlson was compensated like a mid-career Major League Baseball star to play his part as a meat megaphone for the worst and oldest impulses in American politics. That the demands of the job changed the way they did, such as the rich kid heel, remember, wrestling heel,
right,
became a howling blood and soil fascist, is meaningful in a number of ways, and that's why I follow this. But I think most significantly in how it reflects the vacancy and drift that define our increasingly theatrical and abstracted politics, or as I would tell you, in other words, this is all wrestling. That Carlson, in his latest guise, also mixed in some vague and unconvincing umbrage at the brutal grind and predation of neoliberal capitalism is interesting only as a new symptom of the virus that Carlson has represented his entire career. There's an empty space at his core that mirrors the empty space at the center of American political culture, but especially on the right side, I would say, especially in the Republican Party. It's what's made him so good at pretending to be whatever he has to pretend to be, and what keeps him both him and the brutal status quo that he has always served in place, finding new and harsher ways of playing pretend, the spinning of bloodier and more all-encompassing fantasies. It exists to make sure that nothing better will ever replace it. Only a ghoul could flourish in it, as Carlson has. Only a fool could mistake someone playing his part for anything but an enemy. And his future, therefore, remains bright.
Yeah. Well,
because that's who they are. And yeah, I thought that was an interesting commentary, and really gets to the heart of why is Tucker even important. It's not because of why he was fired. That's not what makes this a story.
Well, no.
It's that the emptiness of Tucker Carlson was as popular as it was, and that emptiness, that core of vacuum, that's at the core of who he is and who he stands for, represents the Republican Party, Donald Trump's politics. And looking at Carlson and the reactions tells you a lot about the audience, even if it tells you nothing about him, and that's okay, because who cares about him? Okay. He's merely a vessel for looking at what he represents.
Fair enough. I mean, in terms of, okay. Well, I mean, I don't know. I guess I don't care about what he says, but then I guess if he's disposable, let's dispose of him already.
Sure. But what does he say about his audience? Because those people go out and vote, and so we're always going to be concerned about them. Now, sometimes it's to ignore them. Sometimes it's to refute them. Sometimes it's to simply outvote them. Mm-hmm. But they have enough votes so that they win stuff. And when they win stuff, they do things like Ron DeSantis' Florida. So you can't ignore them.
Yes, I guess that's true. We'll have to simply defeat them after all.
Exactly. Here's...
Though they may die.
Well, eventually they will, because they're all old.
Yes.
Jack Schaefer. Don't believe everything you read about Tucker Carlson, and he goes into a whole story about how everything you've heard about why he was fired is probably bullshit.
Oh, well,
again,
then
it's all myth and it's all gossip, and so there's a theme that runs through here, which I, for one, found interesting.
Yes,
even if you didn't.
How did I get on the wrong side of this? What? I'm okay with this. That's true. Yeah, and as a matter of fact, we did receive just yesterday communications indicating that maybe there's even a 15th reason why he was in fact fired. Although I think it's one of the earlier 15 already considered. But I think you mentioned that there was something about the evangelical Christian nationalism that freaked Rupert Murdoch out in particular. But so that's been floated again. But yeah, I mean, I think that the firing is at the same time simplistic and complicated, which is to say, there were 10,000 things that annoyed the people who are allowed to fire Tucker Carlson.
But something happened Friday night because they didn't do anything until then. Yeah,
but Friday night is just a natural time to take care of these things. It's the end of the work week, and you say, you got time, you're sitting around on the weekend and just say, that guy is super annoying and I don't know whether I can put my finger on it or not, but you know what? I'm the boss and on Monday I don't want to see him anymore.
Right.
And it doesn't really matter whether your thoughts take shape or not.
Right. So enough about Republicans. Let's talk about Democrats.
Who? All right.
And this next comment I made on Twitter actually incorporates what Nate Silver represents with Biden running.
Okay.
Which is to say, don't believe everything you hear. So I guess you can get the Tucker Carlson story in there, too.
Right,
what I said was Biden is old, Trump will be the nominee, and it's 2020 all over again. And the people saying that are the folks who foresaw a red tsunami, but not Kansas or Wisconsin, or the demise of Tucker Carlson. So when people tell you that, you can ignore it because they don't know what they're talking about.
I mean,
it's not 2020, it's 2024, and a whole lot of stuff's going to happen, including Trump indictments. It's not the same.
Okay.
And where does that leave us? Well, here's one. This is a guest essay in the New York Times from Liz Smith, who's a Democratic operative who's worked with the Biden administration. Biden's biggest advantage has nothing to do with anything he's done.
All right.
I mean, the programs are great. They're going to help people. The timing is good. But instead, she
You have good
writes, it
window
might
dressing.
come from the chaos among Republicans. Remember that theme, chaos agent?
Yes, I do.
Trump?
I thought that was his plan or something.
Instead, it might come from the chaos among Republicans. This is welcome news for the president, who's fond of telling voters, don't compare me to the almighty, compare me to the alternative. There's been talk among many Republican leaders and donors about moving on from Trump, but obviously that's not happening because DeSantis is in free fall. Plus, DeSantis keeps doing stuff like the 6-week abortion ban that just makes it even harder for him to win. So Liz Smith writes, a key part of Biden's appeal for Democrats is he doesn't provoke the sort of divisiveness that Mr. Trump does. Despite Mr. Biden's sagging approval ratings in the 2022 midterms, we saw voting against the president was not a big motivator. Mm-hmm. If the trends continue, Democratic voters will continue to be motivated to vote against an extremist Republican Party, and Democrats will stand a good chance of winning the critical independent bloc. Now, they still have work to do. They have to do the debt ceiling. They need to increase this messaging to voters. They had a good rollout. They had a very good video made for the TikTok crowd with lots of flashing images only for a second because short attention span and all that sort of stuff. The message is as subtle as a sledgehammer. Do you really want to hand the country over to the Republicans and relive the chaos of the Trump years? Ultimately, if Biden emerges victorious, it'll be because voters preferred him to the alternative and not to the almighty. And she's right about that. In fact, David Frum takes it one step further.
Doesn't run.
He's got a piece in the Atlantic called The Coming Biden Blowout. Republicans thought about running without Trump in 2024, but lost their nerve. They're heading for electoral disaster again. Says there's no secret to a more intelligent and intentional Republican plan. Replace Donald Trump at the head of the ticket with somebody less obnoxious and impulsive. That's why DeSantis wasn't part of that plan, because he's more obnoxious. And he's not impulsive. You know,
just obnoxious.
He's just obnoxious, and it's planned obnoxiousness, which is so weird, you know. It's like, I'm not just going to impulsively not kiss babies. I'm going to plan to not kiss babies and run on it.
But it's not even I
hope you vote for me because of it.
A plan would feel different. It's interesting. He's sort of occupying this middle ground, I think. He's not impulsive, but he is entirely reactive.
Yeah.
It's a plan to do that, and just whatever happens that sparks outrage, I'll do it twice as hard. That's sort of a plan, but it's still not, an original thought.
So that's not happening.
Okay.
The second leg of this 5-legged stool here, the second leg was capitalize on inflation and other economic troubles. The problem is we're not in recession, and we may not go into recession. And in fact, there's stories now on Wall Street about all these people planning on recession may lose their shirts because that's not what's happening.
Oh, okay.
We may be stuck in where we are now, but it's not a recession, and it's not as bad as it could have been.
What if all these people do lose their shirts? Then they'll think it's a recession. We know that.
No, they'll think it's a depression, because when you're out of a job, it's a depression. It's when your neighbor's out of a job that you think it's a recession.
Yes.
Number 3, offer plausible ideas on drugs, crime, and border enforcement. They can't even get a border enforcement bill passed because Kevin McCarthy. Number 4, and this is a great one, reassure women worried about the post-Roe future.
Yeah, don't worry, women.
That's what Nikki Haley's trying. Complete dud, complete failure.
All right.
Because Ron DeSantis in 6 weeks and all the other states that are doing things that make you in the position where you can't forget it.
Keep doing this.
And number 5, don't be too obvious about suppressing Democratic votes, because really blatant voter suppression will provoke and mobilize Democrats to vote, not discourage them. And unfortunately for them, David Frum writes, Republicans have turned every element of the plan upside down and inside out. Despite lavish anti-Trump donations by big money Republicans, Trump is cruising to easy renomination. Rather than capitalize on existing economic troubles, Republicans have started a debt ceiling fight that'll cast them as the cause of Americans' economic troubles. And worse for them, the troubles are receding. Inflation's vexing, but the recession the Republicans hoped for didn't materialize. Instead, Joe Biden's presided over the fastest and steepest unemployment reduction in U.S. economic history. The big new Republican idea to halt the flow of drugs is to bomb Mexico.
Yes.
Instead of reassuring women, Republican state legislators and Republican judges are signaling they'll support a national abortion ban, already building the apparatus of surveillance to make a ban effective.
True. We should
Republican
bomb women.
state-level voter suppression schemes have been noisy and alarming when the GOP plan called for them to be subtle and technical. Yes. And then, of course, you have things like the subtext of the Georgia indictment that Fani Willis may be bringing has to do with breaking into Georgia machines to try to get the data. I mean, that's not subtle. That's not, let's hide what we're doing stuff here. That's yet another court case that's going to be out in the open where everybody can see Republicans are doing their best to cheat, even to the point of doing Watergate type stuff.
Breaking and entering.
An American must be at least 36 years old to have participated in an election in which a Republican candidate for president won the most votes. So I guess that would be W. An American must be at least 52 years old to have participated in 2 presidential elections in which a Republican nominee got the most votes. That must be HW. Despite this, over the past 30 years, the GOP succeeded in leveraging its small share of the vote into a larger share of national power. That same 36-year-old American has lived half his life or her life under a Republican-controlled Senate, and even more of it under a Republican-majority House of Representatives. Through almost all of that American adult life, Republicans have held more than half of all the state legislatures, and conservative dominance has become ever more total. So some of the Republicans' leverage can be explained by the American electoral system's tilt against metropolitan areas. Some is luck, like the luck of winning in decade years, 2010, for example, redistricting year.
Yes.
And Democrats haven't had a big win in a redistricting year since 1930.
Oh.
That's what I said.
Right? How's this happening?
Oh, no wonder. That's why a lot of this stuff has happened. But the tilt isn't infinite, and the party's luck is running out. And the potential strength of the Democratic coalition is way greater than that of the Trump coalition. I added the way, but it's true. The Democratic disadvantage is that the coalition spans a lot of groups that face extra difficulties, like renters, college students, hourly workers, single parents, people who don't own cars. And the American voting system has been engineered to deter and discourage them. And that's why whenever you see them win, the Democrats, you see the Republicans saying, well, we got to pass more laws preventing college people from voting and this, that, and everything else.
Yeah. Okay. Well, they're adept at recognizing what their problems are.
Right. So in 2022, if you said the Democrats are going to do well, it was hopium. But this cycle, he writes, that hope is well-founded. Republicans are doing everything wrong. And that's why he comes to the conclusion that, it could be that if Trump secures the GOP nomination to run for a second term, the conditions are all in place to transfer the title of worst popular vote loser of the century from the great Arizona senator, we all know who that is, Barry Goldwater, to the push-plotting ex-president. Trump's own party's doing its part to deliver this debacle, and soon enough, all Americans will have the opportunity to do theirs.
Okay.
So he makes a pretty good case that, the Republicans are setting up the worst possible situation. And it's so weird because there were times I can remember various and sundry elections, and I can't give you the exact year, but I remember the feeling that says, I don't understand why people are saying that Republicans have such a big advantage. The polls sort of look even. And then in the last 6 to 8 weeks, things just took off in one direction, but not the other.
I feel like that's every election.
Yeah, so that often happens. So looking at the polls now and saying, how can you say that the Democrats are in great position? It looks almost high. Biden's only winning by 3 or 4 points.
Statistical dead heat? I never heard anybody say that. Okay.
And yet, that's not generally how it happens as things evolve. And there's just so much to happen between now and then. Again, he's making a prediction. Nate Silver doesn't make predictions. But David Frum is making a prediction and saying that's what it looks like. Greg Sargent covers the original hopium guy, Simon Rosenberg, in this piece. The analyst who saw through 2022's Red Mirage has a prediction for Biden 2024.
Prediction,
and he says, despite Biden's age and anemic approval ratings, he's in a strong position to win in 2024 and possibly win big. And I think that is the current state of the electorate. It's not unreasonable to say that, and there's reason to say that, and there are people saying that, so it's not just hopium.
Okay. Well, that's good. I mean, it seems like a reasonable prediction to make.
It is. People get mad at you when you present this stuff because they feel like only desperation and fear of Nazi Germany will motivate people to come out to the polls. I don't think that's true. I think abortion motivates you, and you don't have to pull all that stuff out. It doesn't depend on Trump, and it doesn't depend on Nazi Germany illusions. There's plenty of reasons to go out and vote, and people are motivated. And if you're worrying that people won't show up, they've been showing up.
That's true. They have confounded the experts, thankfully, a lot of times over and over. And I hope they continue to do that. And I guess, right, that's true. It doesn't necessarily need to rise to the level of scaremongering about Nazi Germany, but there's always that opportunity. If that does motivate you, if you're one of those people, there's evidence for that too. So I guess we got something for everyone. And, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, Trump should make it easy to win if you've got anything. Well, there doesn't even have to be anything particularly attractive about you,
right,
your candidate, or your platform.
You ought to be able to beat Trump.
Yeah.
This is not 2016. People now know who he is.
Yes, and we're finding out more, and some more and more
like
disturbing things
Carroll,
about him. I mean, it's
trial.
I used
Eugene
to
Carroll
think
trial.
that it was hard to run for president when everybody thought you were a rapist. I mean, I can see you can get nominated now.
They're
anyway.
just saying that. Well, now they're saying it under oath.
Yeah, right. Well,
that's quite different than, again, the Proud Boys' defense is, we said we were going to do this, that, and everything else, but it was all locker room talk. Trump's defense was, but it was all locker room talk.
Right.
Well, now all of these people who said stuff like that offended and repelled us, they're now saying it under oath.
Yeah, that's
We'll
true.
see if that makes a difference. But don't assume just because it didn't work the first time that therefore it won't work this time. Yeah. It actually may well work because now it's under oath. Now people know.
Right. There's somebody empowered to actually punish you about it. The court of public opinion, as influential as it is, can't sentence you to anything or can't declare you have done this thing.
People learn by repetition. Adults learn by repetition. No. So let me say that again. Adults learn by repetition. And the thing is that if you keep hearing he's indicted, well, maybe there's something, maybe where there's smoke, there's fire,
Maybe they ought to rake their forests so that there's fewer fires.
Yeah.
All right. Well, interesting. Yeah, everybody gets to go into the election season with it. And what'll also be interesting is, I don't know, all the people who said, it's a red wave here. This is actually certainly going to happen, are also, now sounding the alarm. Oh, this is bad because all of these things are happening close to the election season. People will dismiss it as purely political if he is indicted and on trial in seven different places.
People are just not that good at analysis.
Right.
How about that?
Maybe they should just aggregate and stop trying to predict. Okay, very good. Well, we'll see you next week.
Anyway, talk to you on Monday. We'll see if things have changed.
All right. I know. Tucker Carlson said he would talk to us on Monday, too. We'll see how that goes for him.
We already talked, and it wasn't very interesting.
All right. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Time for detail and delving into things and getting more, into the weeds about these things. Let's start where I started in the beginning, which was about the new revelations coming to light about the leaker. Now, Greg had mentioned that there was a New York Times article about it, and I don't know, was that in the roundup here or not? Because I should probably have that available too, because all I have is the Eric Toller threads about it. And here we are. There it is, right up at the top, the New York Times article. Did I open it or not? Well, anyway, I can open it and have it available as well. And Glenn Thrush. Oh, interesting. I didn't realize he was on this beat, so we can share some of that. But maybe I'll start with the sometimes more organized thoughts when the editors have the chance to go over things too. And then we'll turn back to Eric Toller, who is actually sort of breaking this stuff live and on the intertubes. But sometimes reading people's threads, particularly when they're really close to the case, skips over some of the background details that it helps to have in place beforehand. So, despite the fact that Eric Toller has been doing the work for longer and deserves, pride of place in this. I don't know. I think we're better served perhaps by starting off with Glenn Thrush on this one. Airman accused of leak has history of racist and violent remarks, filing says. And both are working from the same source here. Eric Toller, if I recall correctly, begins his thread, and there's a thread reader version of it as well that maybe I can use. It's a little easier to get through than the Twitter version, but he starts with taking a look at the pretrial detention motions as well. So, like I said, they're coming from the same, or they're working from the same source here. Prosecutors accused Jack Teixeira of trying to fecklessly cover up his actions and described a possible propensity toward violence. That was true. I saw that Toller was pointing up that one of the more foolish things that, makes this kid look like a kid after all, and maybe that's even good for the defense, is how inept he really is at covering his tracks. He talks a lot about the need to cover his tracks, and then he just, short-term memory, forgets to cover his tracks. He gets distracted by the next thing and never does the cover-up that he wished for or, expressed an interest in executing, and that may prove to be at least part of his undoing. So Jack Teixeira, the Massachusetts Air National Guardsman accused of posting classified documents online, repeatedly tried to obstruct federal investigators and has a troubling history of making racist and violent remarks, Justice Department lawyers said in a court filing late on Wednesday. In an 18-page memo released before a detention hearing scheduled for Thursday in a Massachusetts federal court, the department's lawyers argued that Airman Teixeira, and I'm not certain how he is pronouncing that name, the Massachusetts version of Teixeira is I don't know what, but I guess maybe if we ever are listening in to any of the proceedings, we will find out. Here, okay. Let's see. Oh, okay. Some additional notes from Greg coming through here. But let me continue with this story. Where did I leave off again? Yes, right. So Airman Teixeira needed to be detained indefinitely because this was the Teixeira. Is that how they're pronouncing it in the New York area? Okay, I was looking for that note coming through here. Teixeira, like in Rui Teixeira. It has the same name. I recognize the name. But I guess the sort of the Spanglish version of it, I guess, would be like Teixeira, but maybe not. Teixeira, I guess I could see that. Like, all right. Well, anyway, I don't need to compare it to other names. Doesn't matter. Teixeira, we'll go with that. That seems like actually a pretty good compromise. That's not totally anglicized. So, in an 18-page memo, it was argued from the Department of Justice that Teixeira, we'll say, needed to be detained indefinitely. I think that's a good call because he posed a serious flight risk. I'm not certain. Well, I mean, he does. He's in a lot of trouble, and so it's probably a better option for him to try to flee at this point. Whether or not he has the means to do so is another question entirely, but still. This, not only is he a serious flight risk, but he might still have information that would be of tremendous value to hostile nation states who might then provide the means for his escape, is my conclusion that I add to what's here in the reporting. Airman Teixeira tapped into a vast reservoir of sensitive information, an amount that far exceeds what has been publicly disclosed so far, they wrote. Prosecutors pointedly questioned Airman Teixeira's overall state of mind, disclosing that he was suspended from high school in 2018 for alarming comments about the use of Molotov cocktails and other weapons, and trawled the internet for information about mass shootings. That's usually a bad sign. He engaged in, quote, regular discussions about violence and murder on the same social media platform, Discord, that he used to post classified information, the filing said, and he surrounded his bed at his parents' house, because he didn't have one of his own, with firearms and tactical gear. Airman Teixeira was also prone to making racial threats, prosecutors said, and you might wonder about what's the origin of the Teixeira surname and why that works, but I don't know. The Proud Boys have the same problem, so, I guess it just doesn't matter to anybody. You do what you want, and it's all gimmitarianism. This behavior, so disturbing it was flagged by local police when he applied for a firearms identification card, but I guess he got it anyway, so whoop-de-doo, is certain to raise new questions about how Airman Teixeira obtained a top-secret security clearance that gave him access to some of the country's most sensitive intelligence reports. And I guess the answer to that is, well, if they can't stop you from buying firearms with a process that's designed to make it harder for you to buy firearms if you fit a certain profile, then they're not going to prevent you from anything else either. You know, the side benefits of this system, I guess, were envisioned once as being, well, this will come up in a background check as well for handling top secret information, but they'll look at that and either they'll just not look at all. That's entirely possible about what happened. Or they'll look and they'll say, well, somebody had some concerns about him having firearms, but that's not our issue. If they said, well, we're worried about him talking to Russian agents, I would pay attention to that. Or, it's just like, well, I don't know. I don't check these things. I'm paid to process these applications and I process the application. In arguing for his confinement, prosecutors described a panicky, feckless effort by Airman Teixeira to cover up his actions as law enforcement closed in, including telling a member of a chat group to, quote, delete all messages and instructing a user to stonewall investigators. That didn't work very well, did he? He also tried to destroy evidence, prosecutors said. The filing includes a series of photos of electronic equipment, including a tablet and an Xbox console that he hurriedly smashed, then tossed into a dumpster near his home in do we decide how to pronounce Dighton? Is that right? Dighton, Massachusetts, before his arrest this month. A witness told the government that he threw his phone out the window of his truck as he was driving. And you really have to kind of go further afield if you want to dispose of those. I don't know why I'm giving you this advice. Don't obstruct justice. But it seems to me that if when you throw things out of the garbage can behind your house or even within a mile or so of your house and they know where you've been because you're visible on security cameras, whatever. It's very difficult to cover that stuff up. So the real advice is don't do it in the first place. These efforts appear calculated to delay or prevent the government from gaining a full understanding of the seriousness and scale of his conduct, the department wrote. Any promise by the defendant to stay home or to refrain from compounding the harm that he's already caused is worth no more than his broken promises to protect classified national defense information. Good argument there, too. I swear this time I'll abide by the law. Well, the law never bothered you before, so. But I guess you can say that in any case that people have been indicted. We're accusing you of breaking the law as is. All right. Airman Teixeira's court-appointed lawyer did not immediately return an email seeking comment. He was arrested on April 13th and charged with 2 separate counts related to the unauthorized handling of classified materials. The government has yet to indict him before a grand jury, though prosecutors said they're filing on Wednesday, in that filing, that he could face 25 years and potentially more in prison if convicted. We know how that goes. You say what the maximum is. In a preliminary complaint unsealed after he was taken into custody, Teixeira was accused of, and they keep calling him Airman Teixeira, and I don't know whether I think that's wise or not. Why not? You keep reminding people that he was supposed to be a member of our military, not working for the other guy's militaries. Well, he was accused of abusing his top secret clearance with an intelligence unit on Cape Cod to post documents bearing restrictive classification markings to a 50-member chat group on Discord. That's a little larger than I thought, but still not very big. Shortly before signing off in March, Airman Teixeira told a member of the small group he was, quote, was very happy to share intelligence very few people get to see and solicited requests for information they wanted him to post, prosecutors said late Wednesday. They probably asked for UFO information. Anyway, the material, some obtained through keyword searches of government files. It was that simple and simplistic and stupid. And easy to find, once they are onto you, to check your search history and then arrest you for all those stupid things you typed in. Well, it was eventually distributed more widely. The trove of documents made public revealed the access Western intelligence agencies have to internal Kremlin deliberations, while bearing concerns of the strained U.S.-led alliance to trying to contain Russian aggression without prompting a wider conflict. Last week, The New York Times reported that Airman Teixeira, who worked as a computer network specialist, had been sharing sensitive information far earlier than previously known, and to a much larger group. According to online posts reviewed by the Times, he had begun doing so in February 2022, within 48 hours of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, interestingly enough, to a chat group of about 600 members. That could either be him saying, this is a very interesting development in the news and I want to find out more about it and share the information that I found, or it could be, I suppose, there's an argument to be made. This is when Russian interest in manipulating its assets, witting or otherwise, would be most heightened, and interest posed by others online that might encourage the weak-minded idiots who are out there who can be talked into doing espionage unwittingly to act. We'll see which way the influence flowed in this. On Wednesday, prosecutors confirmed that report, writing that he began to access hundreds of classified documents unrelated to his job starting in February of 2022. And remember, he's only 21, 22 years old now. So, even a couple of years ago, even a couple of months ago, I mean, it's just, he really just should have been nowhere near any of this stuff. The filing provided little insight into what prompted Airman Teixeira to leak internal U.S. intelligence assessments, but it cast his actions, which had previously been seen as mainly motivated by his desire to show off to younger friends online, in a somewhat darker light. Investigators found a small arsenal in his bedroom at the house he shared with his mother and stepfather. Grew up there and he lived there. But, Anyway, inside a gun locker 2 feet from his bed, law enforcement officials found multiple weapons, including handguns, bolt-action rifles, shotguns, an AK-style high-capacity weapon, and a gas mask. FBI special agents also found ammunition, tactical pouches, and whatever that is, and what appeared to be a silencer-style accessory in his desk drawer. He had a toy box. It's just that he was 21 years old and he could fill it with toys that kill people. Prosecutors also made public a series of social media posts from 2002 and 2003 in which Airman Teixeira expressed his desire to kill, quote, a ton of people and cull the, quote, weak-minded, look out, it's a suicide message, and described what he called an, quote, assassination van that would cruise around killing people in a, quote, crowded urban or suburban environment. In other words, the Washington, D.C. sniper, apparently part of his motivation, even if he was like 10 years old when that guy was operational. And P.S., they executed him. So, give that some thought. How Airman Teixeira obtained the documents that he is accused of posting online has been a critical question for investigators. They believe he used administrator privileges connected to his role as an information technology specialist to retrieve the documents. And yet he couldn't figure out how to get rid of the evidence. What a great IT specialist. In his posts, Airman Teixeira said his job gave him access to materials that others could not see. The job I have lets me get privileges, with an apostrophe, which is wrong, above most intel guys, he wrote. Now, remember that he's intimating to his online group of weirdo incels that he's actually like higher ranking in Intel than most Intel guys, when in fact what he is a computer technician who by necessity has to be able to fix and therefore access these systems in order to fix them, but is not supposed to be looking at, or certainly not downloading and distributing, but not really even supposed to be looking at what he's, what's on the computer systems that he's fixing. But essentially he's the janitor at the CIA. And so he's, there are different levels, I assume, of access to top secret information within the CIA. And most people don't have access to the top stuff. But because he's the janitor and he cleans up the desk of the director, he has access to top, information. And then he steals it. He doesn't have that access to it when he takes it. But, he's not supposed to have really access to any of it. But He works in the building. Airman Teixeira has been scheduled for a detention hearing in federal court in Boston earlier this month, but his lawyer, Brendan Kelly, requested more time to address the government's arguments, and the magistrate judge, David H. Hennessy, quickly agreed. The next major step is likely to be the filing of a grand jury indictment, which would include a much more detailed narrative of the allegations against Airman Teixeira, including a more specific accounting of the charges he'll face. Worcester, a city 50 miles west of Boston, is where Judge Hennessy's courtroom is based, but the case will eventually be assigned to a federal judge in Boston, assuming it's not moved out of Massachusetts entirely, which remains a possibility according to people with knowledge of the situation. Who are these people? You don't need to know yet. Officials at the Justice Department have considered asking that the case be moved to the Eastern District of Virginia. Hey, because its jurisdiction includes the Pentagon and its lawyers have extensive experience in investigating such cases, but it's not clear that the federal judges in Massachusetts, where Airman Teixeira lived and worked, will be willing to do so. And the U.S. Attorney for Massachusetts, Rachel S. Rollins, a Biden appointee, believes her office is capable of handling the matter. People familiar with the situation said. Asked about the case this week, Assistant Attorney General Matthew G. Olson was non-committal. It is currently being prosecuted and venued in the District of Massachusetts and Boston. Mr. Olson said, declining to comment further. Well, we knew that. So really, we didn't need his comment at all, but we got him on record and he's not unresponsive. And so I guess, Glenn decided and the editors decided to include that. Now, some, different perspective and a different kind of detail, I think, from the tweet thread offered up by Eric Toller. Now I'm thinking, maybe we do want to take a look at the Twitter version of it so that we can see his profile and remind everybody who he is. And there's not much to the profile except there's only a couple of words, but it actually tells a great deal about where he's coming from. Research/training. And Bellingcat is the outlet with which he affiliates himself in the profile. And so that gives us a different idea, I think, of where he's coming from. So what do we have here? Oh, yes, right. First I actually have a thread from Elliot Higgins, who is founder and creative director of Bellingcat and director of Bellingcat Productions, in case you were wondering about that. And he says, aside from leaking classified documents into Discord for his pals, it also appears that Jack was really into mass shootings. And it's Elliot who's holding up the Eric Toller thread by way of evidence for that conclusion. So maybe I'll do it backwards this way and read you what Elliot Higgins has to say first, and then third. The closer you are to the information, Eric, the further back we put you in our hierarchy for some reason. All right, but Elliot goes on to say that somehow this wasn't picked up in the clearance process, or it was ignored. And what are we talking about? Here's a quote from, I guess, the detention motion memo. The defendant was suspended when a classmate overheard him make remarks about weapons, including Molotov cocktails, guns at the school, and racial threats. That kid heard something, saw something, and said something. So there you go. And there's a big screen grab here. Do we want to get down into this level of detail? Why not? It's available to us. The defendant's personal history is the screen grab here from the memo. The defendant is 21 years old. The defendant graduated from high school in 2019 and does not have a college degree. In March 2018, while still in high school, the defendant was suspended when a classmate overheard him made remarks about weapons, including Molotov cocktails. I read you that whole thing. The defendant attributed those remarks, though, to a reference to a video game. So that's the excuse. In 2018, while still a teenager, the defendant applied for a firearms identification card, or FID. His application was denied due to the concerns of local police department, the department about the defendant's remarks at his high school. So that sort of worked. Temporarily, anyway. The defendant remained undeterred and applied again in 2019 and 2020. Okay. Well, I've stopped going to high school, So is that okay? Can I have my guns now? In his 2020 application, the defendant cited his position of trust in the United States government as a reason he should be trusted to possess a firearm. That's interesting. That's some interesting bootstrapping, isn't it? The defendant's primary residence is with his mother and stepfather in North Dighton, Massachusetts. The defendant kept his gun locker approximately 2 feet from his bed. I don't know why that, is important, but the fact that he had a gun locker is enough. What if it was 3 feet from his bed? In the gun locker were multiple weapons, including handguns, bolt-action rifles, shotguns, AK-style weapon, the gas mask, etc. FBI agents also found ammunition and tactical pouches on his dresser and what appeared to be a silencer-type accessory in his desk drawer. When FBI special agents searched the dumpster outside of his house, they located a military-style helmet with a mounting bracket, such as those used for cameras, affixed to the top of the helmet. A GoPro camera was also found in the dumpster. We'll see whether there's anything on that shortly enough, too. But, yeah, so Christchurch-style gunman equipment, essentially. Elliot Higgins goes on to say, big potential mass shooter energy here. The screen grab from the memo telling us a review of records received from a social media platform also indicate that the defendant regularly made comments about violence and murder. The defendant's statements included the following. In November 2022, defendant stated that if he had his way, he would, quote, kill a expletive ton of people because it would be, quote, culling the weak-minded, which, of course, he could tell from behind the gun just how smart you are as the bullets tear your brain apart. And that's the extent of his examination for you. Remember, I forget exactly what stupid conspiracy theory it was in particular that he told all of his little buddies was totally definitely true, but doesn't speak well for his being a good arbiter of who's weak-minded and who's not. In February of 2023, the defendant told a user that he was tempted to make a specific type of minivan into an, quote, assassination van. Also in February of 2023, the defendant sought advice from another user about what type of rifle would be easy to operate from the back of an SUV. He describes how he would conduct the shooting in a crowded urban or suburban environment. In March of 2023, the defendant described SUVs and crossovers as mobile gun trucks and, quote, off-road and good assassination vehicles. He's so tactical and cool. I think, Elliot Higgins says, that Eric Toller helped stop a potential mass shooter in helping identify him. Another screen grab here, other quotes from Teixeira online, I guess, say things like, I hope ISIS goes through with their attack plan and creates a massacre at the World Cup. Because reasons. If I had my way, I'd kill a expletive ton of people. It's the F word, by the way, our expletive in this. Yada, yada. There's the weak-minded comment again. We've already seen that. And Higgins then displays the photos that I was describing earlier. He certainly was going for a certain aesthetic in his bedroom, he says. And that includes, let's see, a couple of gun range targets, the outline of a person type gun range targets, and he's extraordinarily proud of himself for having hit the target, I guess, and so he kept it and hung it up. There's also a interesting, I guess he chose to cut out and pin to his corkboard a photocopy of the biohazard indicator. I don't know what that really buys him and all of that. Then a sketch that might be, I guess, his version of how he was going to convert an SUV or minivan, although it actually looks like, is this one of those Kia Soul trucks or something? I don't know. But it's a sketch of, I guess, how he planned to outfit his, or a car that he didn't own into the assassination van. And then, of course, there down at the bottom, other people in the conversation identify the little banner that's hanging there as bearing the logo of the Russian military's general staff. All right, well, there's more. that we don't even necessarily need to get into, but if you take a look at the thread, you'll see what I'm getting at. But so gonna guess he was single. I guess more evidence for the incel setup, and you can examine that one for yourself. What else? This thread, he says, reads like he was one bad day away from a mass shooting. And it's him talking about how he's going to convert his or a car of some kind into the assassination van. Then he says, I am Jack's overconfidence. And this screen grab has a conversation between one of the users of his online group and him. User asking, isn't that S word classified? And Teixeira saying, everything that I've been telling you guys up to this point has been LOL. This isn't different. And the user saying, well, you really trust everyone here then? And he says, I have plausible deniability, and none of them know anything incriminating about me. No one has a point of contact to my work. No one knows where I work, and no one knows how to identify me. I've been, DW, I don't even know that. I've thought of that. Well, apparently, all his overconfidence got him nothing. And he was fairly quickly identified, arrested, and now faces 25 years. What do you think? Higgins making the parting comment here. Looking forward to Glenn Greenwald and pals defending this. Then Higgins makes this note. Yes, this pendant on his notice board is from the General Staff of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation. Sort of the things that you thought they might spot in a security clearance investigation, but apparently not. All right, maybe we give Eric Toller his due on the other side of this 2-minute break. We'll be right back. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, that are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Now I guess we'll turn our attention to Eric Toller's own look through the filings from last night and begin this way, although we weren't quite through with Elliot Higgins's description of what was happening here. I guess we'll just read his comments rather than reading all the screen grabs that go with it. But Teixeira then explained, this is a quote from the memo, Teixeira then explained that his phone flew out of the window of his truck while he was driving and that it was run over by a semi-truck. This is like the dog ate my homework of covering up your intelligence leaks. Yeah, I've never had my phone fly out the window. Paper, yes. Phones, no. That doesn't really hold up to scrutiny, does it? The court submissions also include a letter asking for a firearms ID, which apologizes for his past behavior and has this snippet, and I guess now we have to read a snippet. With wearing the uniform and being a representative/ambassador of the United States Air Force, and now having a top secret clearance, I now represent much more than myself and need to watch what I say and do, both in public and in private. Well, that didn't happen. That gets the sad trombone noise for that one. As it affects more than just myself. I think that I have grown as a person, especially after joining the Air Force/ANG and putting on the uniform. I uphold and apply in my personal life as well as my military career the 3 Air Force core values: integrity first, service before self, and excellence in all we do. And apparently not. And that won't argue well for, the release on recognizance pending trial either. Yeah, now we sort of get that point. Okay. So the Threadreader app version of Eric Toller's view of all of this begins with his note that a government motion for pretrial detention of Teixeira was just posted. He lists that and asks, hey, why would he smash his Xbox? Apparently, as we mentioned earlier. I guess that's just, since he did so much of his stuff on gaming platforms, who knows what he was sharing or how he was sharing it or what computer equipment he used to access Discord and other things. I guess he just smashed everything electronic for whatever reason. Initial reporting on Teixeira noted that his Intel drops started in October of 2022, but the new report that we had last week in the New York Times actually showed that he started posting right after the war started, or the full-scale invasion is what it should have said, started in February of 2022. Another screen grab here, basically explaining as much. His Discord posts showed he had an insane number of guns, including assault rifles, but I don't see where we get to the insane part. Any number of guns really is somewhat insane, but a wide collection for a kid who had no need for them, I guess. Okay, fine. Then he, Thread Reader does undo the installment type nature of this. He's just showing screen grabs and making comments about it. The comment that he makes here is Jesus, which is a recounting of the recounting that we read before of his various dangerous sounding comments. Then the photos, which he comments belongs on, I guess the Reddit. I don't know if there is such a subreddit, but he's making it up here, whatever, r/, male living spaces. So yeah, the walls of the room appear to be covered in what looks like camouflage wallpaper. He's put some camouflage netting over some of the cabinetry that he's got there. Photos of military units on the walls. It's a military theme, to say the least. Spoiler, he puts along with the screen grab of a discussion with the user about how they should all delete all of the information and the messages in the screen caps. It is screen caps, really, but screen caps is what I meant. Spoiler, they did not delete these messages from February of 2022, in which, including the one in which they discuss deleting that message or those messages. Then the next question here, or installment in the thread: if you trust the FBI to not take these messages out of context, then the biggest revelation of the new pretrial documents is that Jack Teixeira was preparing to be a potential mass shooter. And it's a big if you trust the FBI. There were all the angry statements we read before, but I guess there's a second. How can we get out of this thing? I guess when you're in Thread Reader and you click on the photos. All right. Well, anyway, he then goes on to conclude, I read through almost 10,000 of Jack's Discord messages on one of the servers he was active on, and if I just read the summary in the first image of the previous tweet, I'd say, can't trust that, typical FBI-fed deception. But the chat logs are pretty specific and damning, right? He keeps saying things like, I want to kill a F-ton of people, and if I had my way, I'd do that. And but he does get rather specific in his planning for the assassination van. This is a February 10th, 2023 discussion, soliciting advice for the proper rifle size to operate from the back of an SUV. Yada, yada, and goes on and talks in some detail about his plans for all that. So, dangerous guy. Glad he was stopped, and turns out that he fits the weirdo, sullen teenager, incel army profile a lot closer than we thought. So, good call on that front, I guess. And, wow. Sounds like a dangerous guy, and glad we got this. We've got him in custody, and maybe we can wrap this thing up without anybody getting killed, except for all of the intelligence operatives that he endangered with his stupid bragging. Okay, let's see. Other things to get to here. file this one. This was something that Greg mentioned as well, but file it under the every Republican accusation is a confession files. This would be, of course, the news that stems from the news that Disney is suing DeSantis. The headline will help you understand what I mean here about the accusations being a confession. Disney sues Governor Ron DeSantis alleging political retaliation. In other words, Disney is saying that Ron DeSantis, as a Republican, joins Republicans in making the accusations that Democrats have, quote, weaponized government, when in fact it is the case, and the claim of this lawsuit that Republicans are the ones weaponizing government and using it to go after their political enemies. Their political enemies, in this case, somehow being Disney and Mickey Mouse. That's a fight you want to have in front of America? Okay. I don't think it's wise. The Florida governor, the subheader says, is working with the legislature to overturn the entertainment giant's latest oversight agreement. Aaron Gregg and Lori Rosa are the reporters here for the Post. The high-stakes standoff between two Florida heavyweights, Ron DeSantis and Walt Disney Company, escalated Wednesday when the company sued the governor over what it calls a relentless campaign to weaponize government power. They went and said it. And squelch free speech. The lawsuit was filed minutes after the expected presidential contender's hand-picked board declared a Disney-friendly deal null and void, the latest in a tit-for-tat feud that began a year ago when the corporate giant took a stance against a DeSantis-backed education bill critics dub Don't Say Gay. Now, the fight between DeSantis and a hallmark of American childhood, that's nice, has turned so acrimonious it is spilling into the 2024 presidential race. It was always in the presidential race, of course, and threatening to pose yet another challenge to the Florida leader's still unannounced campaign. DeSantis' poll numbers have slipped in recent weeks, and Republican opponents are seizing on the feud to cast him as a zealot bent on punishing a private enterprise over their opposition to one of his signature laws. Meanwhile, Disney is refusing to back down, setting the stage for a protracted legal fight that has some Florida residents on edge. The outcome could have implications for DeSantis far beyond the Magic Kingdom. Did I say this word correctly? Though analysts noted his base may also be drawn to a strong-arm approach against a large employer that even Democrats concede has enjoyed privileges other companies do not. DeSantis essentially picked the fight, said Doug Heye, Heye, a longtime Republican strategist unaffiliated with any of the GOP presidential campaigns so far. When you pick the fight and then you lose it, it's very easy to see real problems. The lawsuit filed in U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Florida on Wednesday accuses DeSantis of punishing it for exercising its right to free speech, threatening its business operations, jeopardizing its economic future in the region, and violating its constitutional rights. There is no room for disagreement about what happened here. Disney expressed its opinion on state legislation and was then punished by the state for doing so, the complaint said. It went on to accuse the governor and legislature of, quote, employing the machinery of the state to damage the company. State leaders have not been subtle about their reasons for government intervention. They have proudly declared that Disney deserves this fate because of what Disney said. DeSantis is on an international trade trip, but a spokeswoman called Disney's lawsuit another unfortunate example of their hope to undermine the will of the Florida voters and circumvent state law. We are unaware of any legal right that a company has to operate its own government or maintain special privileges not held by other businesses in the state, said Taryn Fensky, a communications director for the governor's office. The standoff began in early 2022 when Disney leaders criticized the Parental Rights in Education Act, a controversial bill advanced by DeSantis and other Florida Republicans. It's not pluralized here, but should be, prohibiting lessons on sexual orientation and gender identity in public schools through the third grade. The DeSantis-backed Board of Education recently voted to expand the rule to all grade levels. So those of you who thought it wouldn't creep to the rest of it, well, it did. What do you know? What a surprise. Disney's resorts in Florida are some of the state's prime attractions, but DeSantis expressed outrage that the company dare criticize the legislation, and he began attacking the company, saying it had received preferential treatment for too long. DeSantis, regarded as the most powerful Florida governor in at least a generation, just because he's just assuming powers that don't really exist, has repeatedly turned to the state's Republican-controlled legislature to help him rein in Disney. The first effort came in a special session in April of 2022 when lawmakers dissolved the special taxing district created in 1967 to help the company develop and control its vast property near Orlando. But that move quickly caused concerns about what would happen with Disney's tax and debt burden. Local government officials called it a $1 billion debt bomb and said they could have been forced to raise taxes on property owners to pay for what Disney's district used to fund, such as roads and other services. DeSantis ordered another special session in February to address that issue by keeping the tax district but replacing the board selected by Disney, called the Reedy Creek Improvement District, with a new panel. DeSantis chose the 5 new board members and called the agency the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District. When the new board held its first meeting in March, members said they discovered that the outgoing Disney board had handed over most of their power to Disney by approving a new development agreement with the company. That's what they voted to overturn on Wednesday. The toll of the fight is starting to show both in the halls of power in Florida's capital and in Disney's backyard. Some local business owners who run cafes and restaurants on Disney's property, as well as nearby residents, pleaded with the new board Wednesday to end the feud. They said they can't afford to pay higher taxes. The board said will be necessary to pay legal fees to fight Disney, and the ideas floated by the governor, such as new toll roads within Disney's property or even a state prison, would be a burden on their employees. Mark Gibson, who owns 3 businesses at Disney, said he's voted for DeSantis twice, but finds the battle with Disney worrisome. Oh, no. This dispute with the leopard that's eating his face has continued for more than a year. There's already been a lot of negative publicity that we have to deal with guests and with our customers, Gibson said. Ultimately, we're concerned about the repercussions for our restaurants and our employees. Deborah McDonald said she and her family have lived at Celebration, a town built by Disney within the Reedy Creek district, for more than 26 years. The company provides utilities, including electricity, to its more than 11,000 residents. People are afraid of losing their homes, McDonald said. That should worry people. Maybe they wouldn't like the person that cost them their home. Many people in our community are afraid. Uncertainty, fear, and controversy are not good. Martin Garcia, chairman of the new DeSantis-backed board, told concerned business owners they should blame Disney because the company, quote, created an absolute legal mess. It will not work. The GOP-dominated state legislature has been swift to pass most of what DeSantis asked for, but even some Republicans are complaining about being exhausted by culture war issues, including the battle against Disney. These policies are not popular. Not only with us, but they're not popular with Republicans either. Michelle Rayner Goolsby, a Democratic state representative, said recently, so many of my colleagues have been like, I would just like to talk about roads. I would like to talk about boring stuff, but they're being pushed into a corner. At the national level, Republican opponents have jumped in, with former President Donald Trump recently stating in a Truth Social post that, quote, this is also unnecessary, a political stunt. After news of the Disney lawsuit broke, former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley, who's also seeking the GOP nomination, tweeted, hey, Disney, my home state will happily accept your 70,000 plus jobs if you want to leave Florida. And you want to cost her the nomination for culture war issues, fine. Meanwhile, memes of DeSantis being beaten up by Mickey Mouse have been spread online as the feud makes international headlines. Republican strategist Sarah Longwell, publisher of the conservative site The Bulwark, said that while DeSantis' battle against Disney is not automatically bad because he's developed a brand as a cultural warrior, Disney is not the best enemy to have, notably because it is not the type of enemy Trump would choose. Donald Trump chooses enemies that the voters are pretty attached to being against. she said, citing some of the former president's favorite targets, the deep state, elites, the left. Also, they're not real or coherent groups. Compared to Trump's battles, Longwell said, the fight with Disney starts to look a little silly. A single corporate entity with enormous resources and litigious nature. Probably not the best. And it's Disney, for God's sake. Anyway, he starts to look a little silly. He did it once, and it gave him some profile, Longwell said. He made his point. He's fighting against woke corporations, but I'm not sure this has legs in a way that people are going to be continually invested in it. Disney's Magic Kingdom location near Orlando is considered the busiest theme park in the world, drawing nearly 13 million visitors in 2021. Its Animal Kingdom resort is also a top draw, attracting more than 7 million people that year, according to AECOM, whatever that is, AECOM, and the Themed Entertainment Association. Didn't know there was one. Despite the high-profile feud, business has been booming at Disney's parks. Wow, so much for that boycott. The business segment that includes theme parks netted $8.7 billion in the last quarter of 2022, reflecting a 21% jump from the year before, although that may be pandemic-related as well. Matt Roseboom, the editor and publisher of Attractions Magazine, can't believe that exists, which covers Disney and other theme parks, said the Disney-DeSantis feud hasn't impacted visitors to the Florida park. While most guests are probably aware of the battle, it's not really affecting anything. I think everybody's pretty confident that Disney is not going to have a prison in the Magic Kingdom, he said. I think people are just making more of a joke out of it right now. And you don't really want your presidential candidate's central issue to be a joke in the public mind. I mean, I want his to be a joke in the public mind, but that's probably not what he wants. All right, let's jump over to, so which one should we share? There's two ways we can go here. Perhaps the legal line. Rachel Weiner, writing for the Washington Post, will give us the details about the Pence motions that were decided by the D.C. Circuit. Trump can't stop Pence from testifying to the January 6th grand jury, the court rules. Donald Trump cannot block his former vice president from testifying before a grand jury. You know what they're investigating. That, according to the federal appeals court in the D.C. Circuit, the ruling helps clear the way for Mike Pence to speak under oath about the pressure Trump put him under to declare the 2020 election results invalid, while Trump could seek to further forestall that testimony by appealing to the U.S. Supreme Court, or I would add, asking for an en banc rehearing of the issue before the full D.C. Circuit panel. While Trump could do that, other people in the president's orbit have testified after losing the similar battles in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit. No one's gotten or sought to go all the way to the Supreme Court with it. The reasoning behind Wednesday's order remains under seal, so we won't get that, I guess. The decision was issued by a panel that included 2 Obama appointees and 1 Trump appointee, and yet was unanimous, as Greg pointed out. Pence initially fought the subpoena himself, arguing that he was taking part in a congressional proceeding on January 6th and therefore covered by protections for lawmakers. But when Chief U.S. District Judge James E. Boasberg in the D.C. Circuit ruled that the speech or debate clause would not cover illegal acts by the president, Pence agreed to testify. Trump then appealed on the grounds that his executive privilege prevented Pence from testifying, a position also rejected by Boasberg. That emergency appeal was what was denied on Wednesday. Pence's former chief of staff and chief counsel have both testified to the grand jury already. Both were present for a meeting where attorney John Eastman put forward the idea that Pence could throw out the election results and instead recognize alternate electors, which we're investigating around the country, but in particular in Georgia right now, supporting Trump. But only Pence can speak firsthand about his conversations with the former president and his close advisors. Pence, who is considering running for president in 2024, has in interviews repeatedly condemned Trump for tweeting in the middle of the Capitol attack that the vice president, quote, didn't have the courage to do what should have been done. That reckless message endangered me and my family and everyone at the Capitol building, Pence has said. In his memoir, Pence also wrote that when he refused to endorse the claim that the election was stolen, Trump called him, quote, too honest. The grand jury expected to hear Pence's testimony, the grand jury that is expected to hear that testimony is one of several investigating Trump. Of course, as mentioned, a state prosecutor in Georgia is expected to announce soon whether she will file charges in connection with Trump's efforts to overturn Biden's victory in that state, although now it's been delayed till July, and we have some idea why that is. And another grand jury in D.C. is investigating whether Trump illegally held on to classified information after leaving office. The Mar-a-Lago papers. All right, let's see. Other things to share here. I had an email that I had marked for sharing from a friend of the show, Roger Hake, who says, with regard to our mention of the Montana story, which really kind of blew up in popularity yesterday, but we were just along for the ride, I think. But the story of, who are we talking about? Oh, yes, right. But now I forget the full name of the person we were talking about. Just the Zephyr's the first name, and now I've since forgotten the entirety. And let me go back into the archives and make sure I have it all correct here, so that we have the right people in mind. Oh, it's not easily found all of a sudden. Dang. Okay. Well. Why is that not immediately obvious? All right. Well, I'm sorry that we didn't get that right, but let's get to the comment that that I thought would be worth sharing. Roger says, I went to college there in Montana, and I miss it except for the politics. So I've been following the story closer. I don't remember where I read it, but some Republican elected official characterized Zephyr's raised fist. Remember, I mentioned that was the case. Zooey, that's right. Zooey Zephyr. Zephyr's the last name after all. All right, well, it's whatever. ZZ Top. We'll remember her that way. But Zoe Zephyr, thanks, Mom, for chiming in on that one. But as I mentioned, the real weirdness of the story was how far Republicans were twisting things and, going on fishing expeditions here in order to try to characterize this as some sort of insurrection or riot. It's a really weird proclivity that the Republicans have for doing this. Both people in it started, I guess, with Republican representatives saying things like, well, this was just normal tourism, which was incredible. But now a common thread here between what happened in Tennessee and what happened in Montana, in both cases where people have showed up to protest, and they've protested peacefully. I mean, I think by most accounts, up until right now, both Republicans and Democrats used to agree that standing and chanting counted as peaceful protest. But now Republicans are fully committed to the idea that when Republicans do it, it's peaceful protest, even if they also smash in the windows, threaten to murder people, and smear feces on the wall, that's peaceful protest. But when Democrats do considerably less, stand and chant, even if they are standing and chanting in the public galleries of the legislature, where they're admittedly not supposed to do that, but fully willing to submit to arrest peacefully at that and be carried off, but they have to show up with helmets and face shields and sticks and all the riot equipment so that the Republicans can point to that and call it a riot. So, as I mentioned, in addition to the acknowledgement of the chants from the visitors gallery, Representative Zephyr here, Zooey Zephyr, raised her fist. Well, she was holding a microphone that she was supposed to be speaking into because she was still, I guess, allowed to speak on the floor, and raised the fist in salute to those who were protesting. Now, the Republicans have been characterizing that as endorsing insurrection. So chanting from the gallery is now an insurrection. And in addition, I guess, as he points out here, maybe someone ought to ask Josh Hawley about this. He, of course, was photographed famously raising a fist toward the then still chanting, but about to get in a fist fight with the cops, protesters outside the Capitol when they could still have been called protesters. They, of course, very quickly became insurrectionists. But if raising a fist is encouraging insurrection, then I guess we got a case against Hawley now, and it's being made by Montana Republicans, who will immediately, of course, disavow it when you point that logic out to them. So there you go. This is a movement of the Overton window, he asks, or is it just the latest iteration of the Waldman rule regarding accusations and confessions? Well, it can, of course, be both. But yeah, I mean, it's a good point, actually, bringing up the Overton window, because you are actively seeing this happen over and over again in ways that, you know, you thought were ridiculous and no one would accept a few weeks ago. And now it's become standard practice. It's really just quite annoying and worrisome in general. Okay. So we got to wrap things up, of course. Now's the time to do so. But I did want to point out, before I go, if I can scroll back and find it, Matthew Rigdon was the one who had sent Greg and I the suggestion that maybe we're making more of the Tucker firing, or making it more complicated than it really has to be. And he sent us this Vanity Fair piece, the contents of which we won't be able to get to, but I do highly recommend it, as it is by Gabriel Sherman, and I always enjoy the work that he does for Vanity Fair and elsewhere, saying Tucker Carlson's prayer talk may have led Fox News to the Fox News ouster. That stuff freaks Rupert out, is the quote in the headline. The subheader reads, Fox Corporation Chair Rupert Murdoch is said to have balked at Carlson's remarks in a Friday night speech. That explains the timing, possibly. Driving another theory about the primetime star's abrupt exit, he doesn't like all the spiritual talk, said a source. Well, who is this source? Well, I don't know if it ever gets revealed, but Gabriel Sherman writes this up for Vanity Fair. I recommend it to you. Maybe we'll peruse it while we're off the air and decide whether it requires a reading all by itself. But a good suggestion for material. Thanks very much, Matt. And time to move on now to, well, ordinarily this is the point at which we hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, but I understand there's some distractions going on that Justice may or may not want to fill you in on. But at any rate, it means no show today. What he's got planned instead, that I don't know. It's a big mystery.
Listening to Kagro in the morning with David Waldman.
That part is not a mystery. We were definitely listening to Kagro in the morning with David Waldman at this point. All right, I'm sure he's got some great placeholder material, as he usually does, to keep you busy and active, but I'm sure he'll be back with us hopefully by Friday. But I don't know. Stay tuned to reveal the mystery next.